For too long, the best part of the Cardinals' offseason has been missing. For many, Mock Draft Monday with the Cardinal rule was a mainstay, and now it is coming back. But this time, with a new host. Tune in for the next version of Mock Draft Monday on the Cardinal rule.
What is up, everybody? This is the first episode of the new edition of Mock Draft Monday on the Cardinal Rule with a new host, me, Kyler Burd. But of course, I am joined with the great papa of all of us, Joseph Camo. In fact, that's Dr. Joseph Camo to you. Joe, how are you?
I am well. I'm excited about getting some other folks working with us on TCR. I've kind of talked about this in the Discord, and I'm excited to have you take over Mock Draft Monday. And I think you did, so much fun with that trailer. We're just watching this behind, backstage and just loving it. Your best work yet, as you said. Excited to be back. We're going to be rolling out, and some other folks are going to be working with the TCR community. I'm kind of here to help pass the baton. I'll still be present, involved, but there's going to be other faces doing some TCR stuff, and I think it's going to be a really cool direction for the channel. So I'm excited to be here as your guest, Mr. Kyler Burd.
I know, a guest on your own channel. Look at that. Look at that. No, I'm very excited. I know that Joe has mentioned in the Discord and stuff, and a lot of you listening probably already know some of what's going on. But in addition to me doing this Mock Draft Monday, there will be some other additions to the Cardinal Rule YouTube channel that I think everyone will be super excited for as we go through the off season and then as we get into the regular season as well. But for now, before any of that, we do have to talk about the draft. This is off season time, and not only is it draft prep. Today was the very, very first day of the free agency period, technically the legal tampering period, although the actual differentiation between that and free agency is honestly not that much. People are making deals today. People are going to new teams today. They just can't sign any of those contracts until Wednesday. But we have had quite a bit of Cardinals news today. First, though, I'll take a look through the comment section just to see who we've got back, because it's been such a long time. It's been over a year since one of these, right?
Yeah, it's been a minute, as the kids say.
It has been.
And a lot of familiar faces in the chat. So,
of course, good old Silver Wolf. You're always here. It's a pleasure to have you back. Red Sea, same with you. Some of these old faces that I remember from our days doing this together, Joe. Someone's already ready to get into it. We will get to this. We will get to this. Thanks for tuning in, Jake. Drew, pleasure to have you. Drew, stick around. Maybe you can be making some announcements in the chat as well that people would be interested in. Mono, of course, a classic. And look who we have here.
Oh, wow.
Our good old friend, Aaron Van Buren. And yes, it is a happy Josh Sweat day to all who celebrate. Something got done today, and it was good. The Lord saw that it was good. Brett Jones, nice to have you in here. Hello to you. And I believe this is for you, Joe.
It's, if you're not part of the Discord, you should join the Discord, because we have a lot of fun, and they like to call me Papa in there.
And I think it's fitting. I don't want to say that I'll be your stepdad, because I feel like that's weird, but it's a co-parenting situation, and we're trying to figure it out. Okay, we will try to figure it out. Drew, thank you for that, because truly, that trailer was the best thing I've ever done. It might only be 27 seconds, and maybe that says something about the rest of my content creation, but thank you. I do think that's the best thing we've ever done. Yes, we've already got a ton of people in here. That is because this really is, like I said in the trailer, a mainstay of the Cardinals off season. So we really do appreciate everyone that is in here and back for this, that we can talk about a little bit of the free agency. We'll talk about a little bit of that at the top, and then we will get straight into the mock drafts. I think I've gotten everyone at least one.
There's a few more. We got Teo Capero here.
Teo, thank you. We've got Austin. Nice to see you too. And how kind is that? Joe is the father. And thank you for calling me the chill uncle, because I do think that fits my personality the best.
Yes. And thank you for the super chat, of course.
And yes, obviously, thank you for that, Red Sea. And Brian, nice to have you in here too. Old friend from Twitter, Dukes of Arizona. Thanks for being here, dude. Thank you. And you, Jose, we will get to this question in just a little bit. So let me go ahead and open up some free agency news, if that's all right with you.
Real quick, while you're bringing that up, Carvage, thanks for being here from Down Under. We got some good Cardinals fans from all over the globe, including from the Down Under part of the globe. Appreciate you. And we got Mizaki Felix. What is up, Professor? What is up, Professor, to you as well? Appreciate you being here. Good to have you here hanging out with us. Good to be back.
All right, let's jump into what happened today. Some of this happened a few days ago, but the most action has really just been Monty re-signing old Cardinals, which is kind of how he approached free agency last year too. He really focused on re-signing his own guys, and I think last year he did not sign anyone day one of free agency, and that was super frustrating for a lot of people. And we did have to wait a little bit to get our big splashy one, but we did eventually get it. But just to go over it real quick, who is coming back? We have 27 pending free agents going into this offseason. And I've written a few articles about who I predicted would come back. I landed at around 7. I think there'll be some pretty big roster turnover, because last year's team just clearly wasn't good enough at 8 and 9. You do need to turn over your roster a little bit, but we did bring back some good pieces. We got safety Joey Blunt, who is a great special team ace guy. So to bring him back for 2 years and 3.75, great deal. Also bringing back long snapper Aaron Brewer, also a great deal, because if it's not broke, don't fix it. And Aaron Brewer has been a very consistent guy. This will be his 14th year in the league. So bringing a long snapper back for a year and 1.4 million, it's just a no-brainer. Why mess with that if you don't have to? We also have outside linebacker / edge Baron Browning coming back, and he was one of my big targets for Monty to bring back. We only got 8 games out of him last season in that midseason trade with Denver. So bringing him back at 2 years, $15 million, so $7.5 million average. I saw way too much complaining on Twitter about this. I think that is a great move. The Rallis defense relies on heavy rotation. You're not relying on Baron Browning to be your superstar sack guy, but he got to the quarterback consistently. He can pressure. He just didn't close the deal a lot, but I think he deserves a full year to see in a Rallis defense for sure. We also brought back guard Evan Brown, who, of the 2 guards that we had as pending free agents, was the one I didn't want to come back as but it does say something that Evan Brown's name didn't have to come up that much last year. So at left guard, Evan Brown did a fine job last year. It was maybe nothing spectacular, but I think he allowed 2 sacks, and he just didn't have to be brought up a lot, which is sometimes the best thing that you can say about an offensive lineman. And then swing tackle Kelvin Beachum. He is going to be 35 this season, but it's just a 1-year deal. And sorry, but when I typed this out, I didn't have the details of the deal yet. But I also think that's a no-brainer. After Jonah Williams goes down in week 1, Kelvin Beachum comes in again and does a swing tackle thing and proves to be a savvy veteran that can get stuff done in a pinch. So, yeah, he's not the solution at the position or anything, but if anything happens to Jonah Williams or Paris Johnson Jr. next year, I'm pretty comfortable having Kelvin Beachum in the room.
Yeah. I think these were all just kind of really kind of kind of straightforward, smart signings, nothing flashy. Blount was really good on special teams, made a few plays, really big plays there. Aaron Brewer, good long snapper. We know how important that is. Baron Browning, that's the contract. When you're looking at what people are getting, like that's a pretty reasonable contract,
Absolutely.
and they have a ton of cap space. It's not committing long term. I haven't looked how it's weighted, but the way those contracts are, I'm sure it's most of the cap hits this year, I imagine. And even if it isn't, it's not huge. I like the Evan Brown return. I know, like he's not. As someone said Brett Jones said in the chat that he was a steal, and I thought it was a great signing. He was solid, solidified that guard position. He was right guard. Actually, they played him left guard, and he's a guy who also has played center in his career, so he provides some versatility. And you see the money guards are getting, right?
Yeah.
Aaron Banks, like what the Packers signed him for. This is a really good deal for a guy. And I think what I've talked about, what I think they're going to bring back or bring in one more guard, and they're going to have 3 men competing for 2 jobs between Isaiah Adams, who started late in the season and was better against the run, but the guy they drafted in the 3rd round to be a starter, Evan Brown. And I think they'll, and it might not be a big name. It might be, someone like, bringing back Tristan Cullen, who played well, right?
Right.
Maybe it's a bigger name, but what I'd love to see that. But I have a feeling we're not going to be bringing back. And you saying you don't think they bring? Actually, Jake, I think there's a good chance they do bring him back. He played well for them, and so in limited, and like he's graded well throughout his career, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Tristan Cullen, his PFF grades before he got here and when he got here, he hasn't been a full-time starter, but he's always graded well. So I actually, and I wouldn't mind that. Like if you tell me Brown, Cologne, Isaiah Adams, and then maybe if they draft someone else to develop, I'm not going to hate that for their guards. I think they're planning for Isaiah Adams to be the starting right guard of the future. So.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me right now. So Isaiah Adams is being slotted in a right guard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not mad at that. Like there were flashes of pretty good play from Adams last year. It was just in pass pro that he struggled so bad. But
Yeah.
if you are going to be a really run heavy team, he was pretty effective in the run game. And I do think that they believe with a full off season and the starting experience that he did get last year that Isaiah Adams can like actually be a solution at that position. I do think that. I really don't think that in the rest of free agency they're going to go after one of those really big name guards like Will Freeze or Tevin Jenkins or anything like that. I don't see that.
The money that's going out, the money. I mean, the free agent, every year we say this, but the crazy money that guys are getting paid, and the cap gets bigger every year, so it's going to get that way. But it just shows why you build through the draft. And I've talked about this before. Like, I think I would much rather pay premium for guys you draft who end up being really good. Like, I will have no qualms about paying Trey McBride a contract that's going to reset the tight end market. Someone tweeted about that, or I tweeted something. Someone asked what I think, and looking at the numbers, I think we're going to probably look at like 4 years at $18 million a year for him is probably roughly what we're looking at. And I'd be more than happy to do that, because the alternative is to pay someone who's 70% as good of a player as he is 80% the money, right? So, if you can get those, sign your guys that you draft, and free agency, sometimes you have to overpay a little bit. But I like that. Real quick, I want to say, longtime friend of the channel, Lance, because I live in Georgia. For a moment there, I thought you left us for the dark side, turned into a Falcons fan. I did not. So thanks for hanging out with us. So, but yeah, I think these signings all make sense as depth, rotation, developmental. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing crazy here, but I think it all makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't think any of these are giant reaches. I think these are just identifying solid guys that can hang with a revamped roster and won't bring it down. I think these are all pretty good guys. Now, the 2 that we have added today outside the organization, of course, the big one that we were waiting for all morning, and it did finally come for us, was edge Josh Sweat out of Philadelphia. Now, that was a big name. Him and Milton Williams were supposedly the two big targets that Monty Austinfort was looking at. And very early in the day, Milton Williams just goes for an obscene amount of money to New England after a whole drama where he was supposed to go to Carolina. And then apparently New England swooped in with a huge money offer, which New England has more money to burn than anyone else. So they definitely paid him well, $26 million a year for Milton Williams. But we get Josh Sweat, who's arguably the best edge, best pure pass rusher out on the free agent market for 4 years, $76.4 million. So roughly $19 million a year. Sub $20 million for the best pass rusher in free agency. That's a pretty good deal. I saw complaints about this on Twitter too, but I think this, if anything, is a steal. And this is also, just as an aside, the longest deal that Monty Austinfort's ever given out. He has never signed a player to more than a 3-year deal. So this 4-year deal, this should take Josh Sweat to about 32 in Arizona. He's 27 right now. He'll be 28 during the season. So you're basically getting him right before any regression really hits, and you're having him on the steal for $19 million a year. He's had double-digit sacks recently with Jonathan Gannon. He's reuniting with his former defensive coordinator. This just feels like the perfect fit. And I think this is the one that people were most excited about. This one just made the most sense, along with Milton Williams. But, in a remarkably deep defensive tackle class, I think this is going to very much impact what happens in the draft. I'll say that as a precursor to before we start actually talking about the drafts. But the second outside edition from today is a much, much lesser known name. This one was not on many people's radars, I don't think, but inside linebacker Akeem Davis Gaither. Pretty cheap deal, 2 years, $11 million. So is he a depth/special teams piece? Is he, hopefully not, a Kaiser White replacement? That's sort of the debate going on right now. Mac Wilson welcomed him on Twitter to the linebackers room, and just looking into it a little bit, he kind of gives some Owen Papo vibes, like a really twitchy, athletic linebacker. But I think he's only started 11 games in his career so far. He just finished out his rookie contract with Cincinnati Bengals. So a lot of unknown and not a ton of starting experience, but an athlete.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like when the Cardinals, when they signed, Chris Barnes and guys like that are like, veterans, not, world beaters in terms of starters, but guys that are, good. He's really good on special teams. He has played a lot of snaps. He's a solid depth piece. He's not going to, I don't think he's going to make quite the impact of someone like Mac Wilson, who played really, really well for us. But I think it's a solid pickup. I know people have different opinions on Josh Sweat. Some people, I know a couple of folks really like it. Some don't. He is our best pass rusher, right now. And I think it's really important that Dana brings up a really good point that, there's an out. There is a contract that has 2 years. There's an out after 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a 4-year deal. I think it was, I believe, but there's some of that has cap and kind of magic to it. And they've got cap room for the next couple of years. They're going to have to start allocating that to other guys like PJJ eventually. But, when you have to accept that in free agency, unless you're going after guys like Evan Brown that are kind of that next tier or third tier of free agents, if you're going early, you are overpaying.
Sure.
Free agency, by definition, if you are going after the premium guys, you are absolutely overpaying. And it is a decision that says we're in a position where this makes enough of a difference that it's worth overpaying. And we're in and a lot of times that has to do with where are you at cap wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And right now, with where the Cardinals are cap wise, they can overpay. And if you're going to overpay, edge is a spot we needed to overpay, or defensive line. And they were in on Milton Williams, but didn't end up winning that sweepstakes for him. So I don't mind it. I think it's as bad as pass rush, or at least the personnel was there. I know they generated some pass rush, but as bad as of a need we had, I like it.
I agree. I think both of them are fine signings. Josh Sweat is an immediate upgrade over anything we've got as far as pass rushers. So will he completely change the game? I don't know, because you can definitely make arguments that he benefited from a Philadelphia defense that was just stacked at every single position. You could make the same argument about Milton Williams, though. He was in a rotation with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. It was just a stacked defensive line. He benefited from that for sure. But Milton Williams probably made several $1,000,000 just from his Super Bowl performance alone. And Josh Sweat probably did too. Josh Sweat had 8 pressures and 3 sacks in the Super Bowl. So if it was another year, that's kind of like a Super Bowl MVP Von Miller type of performance. He didn't allow Patrick Mahomes to be Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl almost single-handedly. Great defense, but Josh Sweat was a giant part of that. So I do think people are kind of underselling the amount of talent that Josh Sweat can bring. And he's worked with Jonathan Gannon before. He's had his best season with Jonathan Gannon statistically. So he knows how to bring something out of him. I think it is, out of everyone that's available total in the free agent market, Josh Sweat is the best fit for coaching and playing style. So I do think that's a home run pick, and I think the money at $19 million a year is great. And I can't remember who I heard it from, but I did hear somewhere earlier today that a lot of these deals out of free agency now are being structured like that, where all the guaranteed money is in the first 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
The deals are fairly long. They're being like 4 or 5 year deals now, but all of that guaranteed money is up front. So you can cut out from these players in 2 or 3 years if they do age and they do regress. So if that is a thing that happens, then maybe Josh Sweat is easily releasable in 3 years if that's the way that they structure it. But with the amount of money that we've got to throw around, I don't see how you could have done much better for edge with what's available in free agency right now.
I agree. I mean, I think this was the best option that did not involve trading for and signing to a big extension someone, right? And listen, if we could have got Myles Garrett, I'd do that, but we didn't, right? We couldn't. They threw a whole lot of money at him. I know Trey Hendrickson, a lot of people were hoping. All those are options that involve a lot heavier investment, and I would have invested for Myles Garrett. Trey Hendrickson is a nice player. I don't know that I would go that kind of investment on a guy who's 30.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of Sweat and then develop BJ Ojulari and maybe draft someone and develop. And Sweat is a really solid edge rusher while you're developing Ojulari or someone else that you draft.
Absolutely. And I don't think Sweat necessarily precludes taking an edge somewhere in this draft if you do think that this is a special edge class, and a lot of people do. Because that the Rawless Gannon defense is so rotation heavy anyway that you're never going to have the one guy that's playing the 90% of snaps. So even Josh Sweat with all of that money is not going to play that amount.
Yeah.
That's just not the way that Rawless's defense work. And I would love Trey Hendrickson too, because he's an undeniably talented guy. He's had 17 and a half sacks the last 2 years, and he was a sack leader last year. But he's 30 years old. He would bare minimum require $30 million a year. We got a 27, soon to be 28-year-old guy who's also very talented for probably 12, 13, 14 million less per year than it'd take to get Trey Hendrickson, and you don't have to give up draft capital. It's just a good thing. If BJ Ojulari can actually be healthy and play a full season, if Josh Sweat doesn't have the knee thing pop up again, and Baron Browning has a full season, I think you've got some guys who, if you can get just a little bit more interior pressure from a defensive tackle in the draft, probably, then I think that's a pretty decent pass rushing group, and so clearly an upgrade over last year. It's not even close. So I think this is a successful first day of free agency. What do you think?
I do. I think you needed to get either a DT or an edge. That, to me, as long as you address one of those two positions early, that's a success. That maybe they'll continue to do that. I would, it'd be nice if they would have got a defensive tackle, but for it to be successful, you need at least one of them, not necessarily both, because you can address the other in the draft, or maybe there's some other free agents that are coming on down the line. So if they did not get an edge or defensive tackle, then it would not have been a successful first day to me. But the fact that they got at least one of those, and getting a depth linebacker, I don't mind that either. So yeah, I'd say for day one, because I'm not of the mind, I'm not the kind of person who believes in going super big in free agency. I think this year I want them to go a little bigger than in the past, but everyone who's listened for a while knows I am very much a draft person, and free agency to supplement depth and, get guys who can start for if you need them to, but don't overpay in free agency. But this year, with all the room they have and the fact that they're in year 3, I definitely was of the mind of spend a little bit, and I liked the way they spent it.
I agree. Of all years, this is the year that we have money to spend. And I do think that Monty needed to show some willingness to do that, to not just bargain basement hunt this year, especially since it seems like the plan was 2025 to be the actual contention year all along. There were reports that came out that 2024's 6-4 start surprised the front office. Like, they weren't even expecting that. So they were planning for this year to be the year. If you didn't spend that money, that would be something pretty serious. And Drew has this point about the edge class and the interior defensive line class, the running back class. That is what sets this draft class apart. It's a notoriously weak quarterback class. It is a average at best wide receiver class, average linebacker class, but you do have some really elite defensive guys and probably 12 running backs that could be starters. It is a crazy deep running back class. That will not happen. I am just going to preface all of the mock drafts that we're going to do. We are not drafting a running back this year. I can't see a possible way that happens. But edge and interior defensive line are incredible needs, and I think we are going to benefit massively from that. It lined up with our team needs perfectly this year for once. It really is going to help us out, I believe.
Before we move on to the draft stuff, real quick, I think Brett makes a really good point here. Right now, only 5 picks, got to plug holes in free agency. Though I also think what we're going to see is, I think this increases likelihood we're going to see some trade backs going on.
Yeah.
Especially, I would look at a trade back in the first round as a high possibility, and maybe even also the second round, because it's not a situation like where we're staring down, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, we're at 16, there's so many ways that board can fall. And if there's 3 guys I like that are still there, I could totally see them trading back to add draft capital.
For sure. With 16 not really being a prime position, and Monty's willingness to trade back anyway, even if you're picking top 10, only 5 picks, definitely feels like a Monty thing to do, to move back and get a little bit extra. Because the draft, especially when you're not talking about blue chip top 6-7 players, statistically it's a crapshoot. And the crapshoot extends first round through the end. And the more players you pick, the better chance you have of getting a hit. And that's just the numbers. You're not guaranteed a hit just because it's first rounder at all. If anyone knows that, it's the Cardinals.
Yeah.
So
right.
Getting more picks is a very viable option. So are you ready to look at some mock drafts?
Let's do it.
Yeah, we're actually going to start with yours.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Oh, actually, I had this one in here, but we've talked about Josh Sweat. He was the PFF 10th highest ranked free agent in this class. Feels nice that we made a big enough splash to get someone ranked this high. He's number 5 on the ESPN list of free agents.
Yeah.
So we got one who was going to be highly paid somewhere, and he's coming to Arizona. So that is great.
Real quick, I want to say hey to Brian. Thanks for being here, Brian Perkins. He's always very encouraging, very kind. Sorry. Thanks for being here. Sorry. Yes. My mock.
Tell us all about it.
Okay. Well, I think there's some folks who are going to like, from based on some of the comments in the chat. I know, for example, Lance is going to love getting someone big first, right? We need a mammoth in the middle, right? Well, that's where I started with. And behind, a little behind the scenes, this is not the first mock. I originally set a different mock to Kyler for tonight, and then I pivoted after we had signed Josh Sweat. My first pick was an edge on my first mock, but I was kind of the mind that the Cardinals, depending on what they did in free agency, if they landed an edge, I feel like they're going DT early. If they landed Milton Williams as their big free agent, I was going to have an edge there, right? And I think, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's their plan, right? Whichever one they don't address in free agency with their big signing is where they're going to go. So Kenneth Grant is a guy. There's some other guys that that I considered there, but he's kind of the defensive tackles that are available there. To me, he seems like the best. He's really good, against the run, but he also has a little bit of pass rush chops. For a guy for a nose tackle, he can put some pressure. So to me, that was a really obvious pick. Gives them the nose tackle that they want. And then in the second round, I've got to trade back to get another pick. And then I went with an edge out of LSU, Braden Swinson. He wasn't a full-time starter till this last year, but he had excellent grades in the SEC, kind of some upside. So even though they got Josh Sweat, I really do think they'll probably add an edge at some point to add to that group of guys that they're developing. They've got a handful of guys like BJ Ojulari and such that all kind of have some potential. So I think they're going to potentially keep adding to that stock of guys that they're trying to develop so that when that Josh Sweat deal ends, or when they get that after 2 years, if they do move on from him, they've got someone who's developed and ready to go. In the third round, I've got a weak side linebacker, Chris Paul, very athletic, good in coverage, more of a weak side linebacker than a Mike. A little small for a Mike. But I think, and I think you and I probably talked about this before, I really do think linebacker's a position they look to address again in this draft. They've got guys like Owen Papo, and they've got, the guy they signed today, and they've got, a few guys in there. They've got, Mac Wilson Sr., who played nicely. But I think they're going to continue to just add some pieces there. I think they could use a guy who could be a future starter, if not a starter this year. So I've got a guy that in the third round I think has some potential. Now, my other pick in the late third round, Wyatt Millam, an offensive tackle out of West Virginia. He is this guy shows up in a lot of my mocks at this point. He played left tackle in college. Started left tackle like throughout his college career, but he probably will move to guard. Because he has some struggles when he's pass protecting in an island, but he's a really good run blocker.
Oh yeah.
So obviously that seems to be what this offense is building around, is run blocking, and it just reminds me a little bit of the Isaiah Adams pick, right? A guy who played tackle in college, but is a road grader of a run blocker. And it's a guy I see them drafting who they might try to keep him and develop him as that starting right tackle, as a really good run blocking right tackle, or they move him inside. So that's kind of what I was looking at there. The PFF's comp on him is Will Freeze, a guy that a lot of Cardinals fans have looked at as a guy they might sign. So to me, that was a guy in the third round that could be a right tackle, or they could move him inside. Jalen Lane, receiver, I don't, nothing specific about him other than he's really fast. He is, at this point in the draft in the fifth round, you're just seeing, okay, who's there, what's left. And I do think they need a receiver. I think they need a speed receiver to take the top off the defense. So when I'm looking receiver here, I'm looking for who's left, who's got speed, and he's got a 4.3, 4.40. Really good relative athletic score, 9.56 there. So overall athleticism, really good, has some limitations, but if you're just saying run a go route, right, go for it. Right.
Yeah.
And then finally, Simeon Barrow, again, fifth round, you're just looking for what's left that you can kind of fill some needs. Another piece on defense. To me, like his size, height, and weight is very similar to Dante Stills. So he grades reasonably well, played at Miami. To me, he's just another piece on defense, a depth piece who have a similar role to Dante Stills, another developmental depth piece. So again, when you're that late, you're in the 5th round, you're seeing what's left. So that was kind of my thought process there. What says you?
I like this. I go a little bit different in mine, and we'll look at that in a minute. But two things I agree on. I think the biggest need for this team that no one's been talking about this entire offseason so far is inside linebacker. If you are functioning under the expectation that Kaiser White's not coming back, then you need to do something there. And I personally, at this point in time, don't think the Akeem Davis Gaither pick is to replace Kaiser White. I think it's to add a linebacker to the room, to add a special teamer and a guy who can play, who has starting experience inside linebacker, and that's great. But I don't think he is meant to be the Kaiser White replacement if White's not coming back. So in the draft, I've fairly consistently been taking linebackers pretty early, 2nd and 3rd round sometimes. And there are some good ones out there this year. I think Carson Schlesinger from UCLA and Chris Paul Jr. are probably my top 2 there. But Chris Paul Jr., biggest knock on him is just his size. He's a pretty small guy if you're going to expect him to play the mic. He does project as like a will linebacker a little bit more, but he is so fast. And as a coverage linebacker, he would be something that we haven't had in quite a while. He can cover the tight ends. He can cover the running backs. He has all the athleticism that you could possibly need from the linebacker position. He's a few inches shorter than wanted. But if the Cardinals have done anything, it is pick people a few inches shorter than optimal. But Wyatt Millum, also, I am down with that pick. I've been more and more impressed with him lately. I do think he kicks inside. That's pretty much projection from everyone. I was looking at the PFF analysis on him earlier. He's got a ton of college starting experience. He's 6'6", 317, 23 years old, and a really, really strong run blocker. So putting him at a guard position, I think it would probably be the move there as well. And Jalen Lane, just in the theme of wide receivers, kind of think that's an underrated need for this team too.
And someone's asking how tall is he? He's 5'10", roughly. Someone else in the chat said just a smidgen under 5'10", right? So he's that is purely a take the top off the defense pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
Which has been something that we've been saying we need on this defense. Your 2 outside receivers right now, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson, great physical possession guys, but they're not taking the top off anything. They don't have that top end speed. That is something that the Cardinals offense just really hasn't had. Greg Dortch has great speed, but with him in the slot, you're not really doing that with him very often. And also, I think we can have an upgrade over Greg Dortch. I know that hurts fans' feelings a lot.
It hurts my heart a little bit, Kyler.
I love him too. Like the Dortch, it was one of the fun things, but we as a fan base, Greg Dortch, Dennis Gardeck, those players who are fun, and I love them as a fan, we got to upgrade the floor of this team. And there are upgrades to be had at those positions that are not Dortch and Gardeck, even though we like them. We can upgrade the floor of this roster. But I agree that a fast receiver like that is something that we could definitely use. And Kenneth Grant, he just feels right. Since you can't get Mason Graham, of course, he's not going to be anywhere close to 16, most likely. Kenneth Grant would be a great pick. And if it's there 16, totally happy with it. If it's in a trade back a few spots down, he might still be available there. I would be pretty happy with that too.
I just checked something because someone asked this too with Millum, right? We're talking about him moving into guard, right? And his RAS score as a tackle is 7 point something, but Jake asked, how does that correlate to guard? And there's a function in RAS where you can change their position. And when you move him to guard, his RAS goes up to 9.05.
Wow.
Now his explosion, his vertical and broad jump is where it's stronger. his like 40-yard dash, 20-yard split, 10-yard split are good, but they're kind of in the yellow. But the size obviously, and then the vertical and the broad. So he's solid athleticism if you move him to guard. Yeah.
I think this is a good question here too about drafting a linebacker or not. If Kaiser doesn't sign somewhere else in free agency, does he have a contract waiting for him here? If he doesn't get the deal that he wants out there, why or why not? I can kind of see the Akeem signing in that vein, that you got an inside linebacker, you've got at least another body in the room. If Kaiser doesn't come back, then draft a linebacker, or you can kind of keep a spot for Kaiser if he tests free agency in the first couple weeks and doesn't get what he wants and he comes back. I can see that.
Real quick, someone's asking about the RAS, the shuttle, and I'm just to show this real quick. This is what he would be as a guard. Maybe I don't know if that might be a little hard to see if I can make it bigger. There's Wyatt Millum as a guard. It has the shuttle, but doesn't have the 3-cone. I know one of those, is it the 3-cone? I think that, or is it the shuttle? I think it's a shuttle where that's a really good predictor. If they're below a certain threshold, they're really high, good likelihood to be really good. But this is what his RAS looks like as a guard.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's solid, right?
And he spent pretty much his whole college career at left tackle, right?
Yes, he played, I think, pretty much the whole time at left tackle. If I was looking at, I looked at it, and that's all he had, at least on the years that they showed. Last 3 years, he had one snap at right tackle in 2023. Sorry, nice. So I stand corrected.
Hey, versatility is versatility. Can't knock him for that.
Yeah.
All right. Do you think it's time to move on to mine?
I do think it is time, and I'm excited to see what you got here. I don't know that I've looked at yours closely.
We started out the same. We have some of the same players in here. In this particular one, I did not include a trade down. Looking back, I probably should have, because I generally do. It is just a Monty thing to do, whether it's 16 or even moving down a little bit in the second round. He kind of loves to do that sort of stuff too, just to pick up a couple extra picks. But we both start with Kenneth Grant, because at 16 in that area, if you're really going to be targeting interior defensive line, you've probably got two major options in that kind of range, Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan. And I do think Walter Nolan is great talent. And I don't know how much stock to put in rumors that are out there, of course. But the rumors about his attitude towards football just rub me the wrong way, considering defensive players we've drafted in the past that didn't really like football that much. Looking at you, Robert Kimdichie. But Kenneth Grant is a football guy through and through. He played next to probably the second best defensive tackle in the country last year with Mason Graham. Great defense in Michigan. Dude is a disruptor. And if you want interior push, Kenneth Grant is a guy who's going to get it done for you. And that is just going to redound to the benefit of the edge room as well. And then also everyone, the secondary, the whole thing. And putting him next to Darius Robinson, I think could be a pretty lethal combination. But I did make a weird move. I doubled up. Top 2 rounds interior defensive players, because that is just an indictment of how bad this defensive room is. Frankly, the defensive line needs to be retooled top to bottom. There is maybe one NFL starting caliber defensive lineman in that room right now other than Darius Robinson. And you can have your own opinion of who that is. My personal opinion is Dante Stills. He's a fine rotational guy. But you need to retool that entire room if you want to have a Gannon defense that does what Gannon's defense did in Philly. We've had this overblown expectation, I think, that Gannon can just be a magician, and him and Rawls have gotten the most out of what on paper is not a super talented roster, so they deserve a ton of credit for that. But if you look at what Gannon did in Philly, he did it with an absolutely stacked front seven. He had Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and Jalen Cart. He had everyone he could possibly want in a ridiculous front seven. So if he wants to do that here in Arizona, he needs the type of players to do that. And Shamar Turner is kind of like Darius Robinson in a sense that he's just a freakily athletic dude. And I do have some problems with Texas A&M defensive linemen. I'm not the biggest believer in all of them, but I do think Shamar Turner could be an option there. And it's unorthodox, but I wouldn't be mad at doubling up there at all. And I follow that with Chris Paul Jr., like you, in the third round, because inside linebacker is a position of need that we're just not talking enough about because we're so focused on the front seven. But something needs to be done there, and I think he's an athlete, and Rollis and Gannon can hopefully get the best out of him, and we won't ruin another linebacker's life, hopefully. Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, tackle from Florida, big guy, longtime college starter at tackle. I don't know that he really has guard flexibility, like guard versatility in there. But from what I saw of Christian Jones last year, I don't believe that he can be a long-term right tackle solution there. We're going to have one more year of Jonah Williams. I think it's worth one more attempt to find a guy that can be a rookie deal, longer-term solution at right tackle, because I don't think Jonah Williams will be here past the end of his contract. That'll expire after the end of the 2025 season. And unless Christian Jones makes a giant leap forward, I don't know. It's at least worth having some competition there for him. And Kyle Williams, same logic as you at Jalen Lane. Fast guy, crazy productive, has some slot versatility, played a little bit in the slot at Washington State. So if you need to and you feel like he is a replacement over Dortch, that's great. But I think that Kyle Williams would add a little bit of juice to the wide receiver room that is a pretty staid possession receiver type of room right now. They need a little bit more of pure athleticism in that room, and I think Kyle Williams and a ton of other options out there could bring something like that. A guy that I've mocked several times as high as the third round is Jalen Royals. He's crazy fast. I'm very interested to see what he's going to run at his pro day. I think it will be in the 4.3s, if not the 4.2s. And we're not drafting a wide receiver higher than round 4 would be my prediction. Can't see that after the draft capital from last year with the number 4 overall. But I do think it's a position that can be upgraded, even if it's not oh my God, defensive line, we need to fix the entire room right now need. I do think we can get better there.
Yeah, I like it. Like, obviously I picked Grant in mind, so I like him at the pick. And when in my mocks where I went edge in the first round or a different position in the first round, Shamar Turner was often the guy I took in the second round. He's a guy who, his profile in PFF talks about his hands and his motor, a guy that played a lot of different spots on that defensive line, a guy that coaches will really like to coach up. So I think that's a really interesting and good pick, in terms of if you're looking to go second round in terms of defensive interior. Going back to back, that's interesting. I don't hate it, but I think I agree they need to solidify that, but I think like they got Dante Sills, I think, in the 5th round, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or
5th round.
So if I'm going defensive tackle in the first round, like I doubled up, but I waited till the 5th round, I'm probably looking somewhere day 3 for that second one if it's me. But that, obviously.
So let me tell you who I considered briefly
Mm-hmm.
for the round 2 pick instead. I did think about going linebacker in round 2 and taking Carson Schwessinger, who probably is the best pure linebacker in this class. And then probably getting another interior defensive guy in round 3.
Okay. Gotcha.
probably makes more sense from a team building perspective.
Yeah.
But also, let me tell you my inspiration here.
Okay.
I'm inspired, as much as I don't like this team, because their fans are potentially the worst fans in the world. Howie Roseman is a damn wizard. And year after year, he does it. He makes it happen in the draft. He takes guys that other people are not super high on and they turn into superstars. And he does unconventional things all the time. And he has built a Super Bowl winning team who's won 2 Super Bowls in the last however many years that is. 5 years? No, longer than that. Sorry, 8 years. And last year, in a weird move, he took Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean back to back. And now he has released the old heads from the secondary because he doesn't need them anymore. Darius or Big Play Slay and Bradbury are both gone in Philly.
Yeah.
And they're rolling with Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, 2 really dynamic young guys. It sounded and felt really weird to see him do that, and it worked out beautifully. There's some Philly luck in there, but when I see someone of Howie Roseman's stature do something that unconventional, I don't feel that bad about taking interior defensive line back to back.
Yeah, I don't hate it. It's a need. I'm probably looking at a different position in there, and maybe that it's a part of my. I kind of like the idea with defensive line having. I definitely like the idea of a blue chip guy, like just a really elite guy. But I also like the idea of kind of building some depth through day 3 guys like Dante Stills. The 3rd round's actually a really great place to get solid defensive linemen too. There's a lot of really solid. You're typically getting guys that are more run stoppers there, but so I don't hate it. I think with so few picks, it makes me less apt to want to do something like that. Is also part of that.
Totally viable. I get it.
Obviously, I love the Chris Paul pick because I picked him as well. I think it's interesting that you didn't go edge anywhere.
Yeah, I probably should have. Let's be honest. But I did wait pretty late in the day to do this draft because I wanted to see, are we going to get Milton Williams or are we going to get Josh Sweat or are we going to get both? See what's going to happen. And with Josh Sweat, I do think that removes edge from the first round. Mm-hmm. It does not remove edge from this draft by any means because we do need more players there. But I do think it is pretty much locking that first round pick, whether it's 16 or a trade down, into interior defensive line or maybe offensive line somewhere. If you just love Josh Simmons or something and he's still there, I could see an offensive lineman in the first round too. I think it's a trenches pick in the first round, pretty much locked in, and an edge in the second, third, fourth. All of that's super viable still, but I would be really surprised if they go James Pierce if he falls or Micah Green. I'd be super surprised if that's the number 16 pick with Josh Sweat on the roster now.
Yeah, I'm with you too. So before we transition to other folks' mocks, I think I maybe want to have just a little bit more of a conversation about because a big part of what this is not just the players, but it's just what positions and at what point, right? That half of it is which players, but the other half of the conversation is, okay, it might not be Kenneth Grant, but we agree defensive tackle seems like a high probability in the first round, even if it's someone else, right? And linebacker on day 2, right? So I'd like to real quick maybe have a little bit of a conversation about some of the positional, what we think. Like what we see based on both of our drafts is defensive tackle early, linebacker day 2, receiver late, a tackle converted to guard somewhere in the middle rounds, right? So I'd like to, and I'll kind of get this conversation started with a couple other positions I didn't draft, that or that I think could be things they look at, or positions at certain spots. And let me start with this. Although I went with a tackle who will convert to guard in round 3, and you did something similar later, I could, and I used to think this wasn't what they were going to do, but I'm increasingly thinking a tackle in round 1 or 2 to be the right tackle of the future is a position I could see them go with, especially with how as I go through my mocks, it's like there's a lot of positions like that they've addressed in other ways where they have guys that are developing, guys that are starting, especially in the early rounds. Like if you're drafting in the first couple rounds, you're drafting someone you want to be a starter. Well, maybe receiver, but this isn't a good receiver class. And we drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think they're going to build more of a run heavy, tight end heavy. And I don't know that they're going to go a lot of capital in receiver. I think they're going to pay one big name guy and go depth. They've got a left tackle, edge. They've signed some guys. Maybe they go early with that. So there's certain positions that are less likely to go early, but I'm increasingly thinking getting that right tackle is a possibility there. You mentioned you don't see a running back, and I lean in that direction because I think they drafted one early last year. They like Amari DeMarcado. Obviously, they got James Conner, but as much as they're going to go with build a running team, I could see them taking a running back a little bit later this time. So I'm not ruling that out. And two other positions. I think safety is not out of consideration. I know they drafted Rabbit last year and they've got Jalen and Buddha, but I think his days are numbered here. And I love Jalen Thompson. I just think contract wise, they've got a lot of money in safety, and they did the Buddha extension and they drafted Rabbit. I could see them draft a guy, maybe, middle rounds to be another guy who's an heir apparent for Buddha, or at least the third safety when they move on from Jalen, which sadly I think they will after this year. So I think safeties is in the consideration, something to think about. And this one, tight end late. Like I know they've got a nice tight end room. They drafted one in the third round, Tip Ryman. They've got obviously Trey McBride, and they've got a nice tight end room, but I could see them drafting someone late with as much as they're going to go build that room. But it would be much later. So those are some of the positions that we didn't really address. I know people at cornerback, they might, but they've drafted so many cornerbacks in the last couple of years. You just can't fit them all on the roster. And I think they're trying to develop them. So but maybe they do draft another cornerback just because they love them. So what are your thoughts on some of the positions and or spots in the draft in terms of what you think they might or might not do in that regard?
Well, I think we've been super defensive minded, especially in the early rounds.
Yeah.
For good reason. The defense needs some retooling for sure. I think first round offensive line is just as likely as anything else. Offensive line is just as important as defensive line, and protecting your franchise quarterback is arguably the most important thing for the success of an offense. So an early offensive lineman, first, second round, zero surprise. If he lasts till 47, I would love a pick like Donovan Jackson. I don't think he'll last that long. I think his stock is going up very quickly, but Donovan Jackson at guard, which is what he really is, he's listed everywhere as a tackle. Donovan Jackson is a guard. He would be an outstanding pick, and you'd be reuniting him with his offensive line coach, and you'd have two Ohio State Buckeyes starting on your offensive line, which is not a bad thing. Yeah. They develop offensive linemen very, very well there. Safety, I get it, because I don't think it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be that surprised if Jalen Thompson gets moved this offseason. My thing against safety and running back is the amount of picks that we have right now. Then that's really it. Just with 5 picks, you have to be super selective about what you're doing. If we had 12 picks like last year, hell yeah, take everyone, which is kind of what we did last year. We took a little bit of everything. If we had 12 picks again, totally. And if you do end up moving Jalen, then you probably do think that Rabbit can start, and maybe you get a developmental safety, and that's a good move. I agree with cornerback. There's a lot on the roster right now, and most of them are young, and I think they really believe in that group in the cornerback room, minus Sean Murphy-Bunting. But whatever. He's been paid, he's on the roster, and he's going to be there. But Max Melton had his moments. If he develops, he's going to be great. Garrett Williams was elite last year. He is probably the best cornerback hit that we've had in a while. So and we didn't even see Elijah Jones last year either.
Yeah.
So we've drafted
Keith Clark. I mean, he that's another depth guy they've got, so yeah.
I think we've drafted 4 cornerbacks in the last 2 years. So I just think that's unlikely with the amount that we've done.
Real quick, and referencing the almighty chart,
That's
which
a good point.
The almighty chart, don't take offensive guards before. Monty has at no point or at no organization where he was where you were paying homage to the almighty chart. There was at no point has Monty or a front office where he was involved taken a guard or center before round 3.
Yep.
Never. Now maybe they buck that trend, but until they do, that is one of the things that until I see him go a guard or center earlier, I am never going to mock a guard or center before round 3. And round 4 is the sweet spot. If you look at the chart closer, round 4 is where they went Isaiah Adams in round 3. That was going early, right? So
yeah. And to running back, my heart belongs to Cam Scadaboo. He is my second favorite Sun Devil of all time, right after Pat Tillman. Okay. He really is up there for me. He was a program changer. He is not going to be an Arizona Cardinal. He just won't. If we are drafting a running back with 5 picks, 1, that's crazy. But 2, it's not going to be before round 5, surely, which also mostly aligns with their drafting belief on running backs, except for Trey Benson, who was a 3rd-round pick. But we had 2 3rd-round picks to play around with last year.
I will say, though, the Monty chart, which is heavily weighed by what New England is, New England goes earlier on running back than most teams. A lot of 2nd and 3rd-round running backs, and even a few first rounds. So I think that the conventional wisdom around the league is go running back 4th or 5th round, right? Those are the sweet spots, right? And you find so many really good running backs. And if you want to splurge, go in the 2nd round. If you want an elite back, right? That's where guys like Derrick Henry were taken in the 2nd round, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you that when you look at the draft chart, the New England history, and then having taken Trey Benson in the 3rd round, they go on day 2 on running back more than most teams.
Okay.
But I would agree with you that where they're trying to focus on defense, I think we went heavy in defense in our mock drafts, but I think they're also I really think they're going to go heavy in defense. I think this is a year to really fix the defense. I think they have all the key players they need on offense, and they just need to add a few more guys to keep the pipeline going on offensive line, maybe a wide receiver. But there are so many spots in defense they need to address. I agree with you that I just don't think we're going to see running back. If we do, it would likely be later, but I think that's not as likely.
Sure. I agree with that. If he trades back and gets a few extra picks, then we're really opening up the possibilities for different positions. But as it stands, I think this is the get the defense right draft year.
Yeah.
And the draft strengths for 2025 align with that so well that you would be foolish to not take advantage of a draft like that, because you do not get interior defensive drafts like this all the time. So you have to take advantage when you can get potential starters rounds 1 through 5 on defensive line. So you got to take advantage of that. The saddest thing I can think about, though, is Cam Scadaboo going to San Francisco and punishing us for years, because I could see that, and it does feel like a Cardinal thing to happen.
Yeah.
All right, so shall we move on to the first fan-submitted one from your Discord, the Cardinal Rule Discord? Let's see who we got. Coming up next, we've got Mono 187.
Okay, Mono in the chat, been active tonight.
He is in here, so let's take a look at what you have done, Mr. Mono. You start with Edge.
A trade, though, first, right?
You do, and I will say you submitted this in the Discord before the Josh Sweat news today. So there's that caveat. But you start with a trade down with Green Bay, going from 16 down to 23 and picking up another second rounder, picked 55. So we've got 6 picks now in Mr. Mono's mock draft here. And we start with edge Nick Scourin out of Texas A&M. And you follow my lead here just with edge. You double up on edge with Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State, Jalen Knoll, wide receiver, as your second round pick, who I love Jalen Knoll. He is one of my draft crushes. Also, like Joe, you've got Wyatt Milam in the 3rd round, CJ West as defensive tackle from Indiana in the 4th round, and Logan Brown, tackle from Kansas, in the 5th round. So the first thing I do want to say is CJ West had a really good combine. And CJ West is one of those sneaky defensive linemen that really shows how deep this defensive line class is, because available in the 4th round, CJ West can be a starter, in my opinion. Now, for me personally, I think with Josh Sweat on the team now, and with the deep need on the defensive line, a double up on the defensive line seems more reasonable than 2 edges along with Josh Sweat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I would say this in general, I think my philosophy towards edge now, considering that they've signed Josh Sweat and they don't need someone to come in and necessarily be the starter, and that they have a lot of guys that are kind of like okay, just that are just a guy. I think the philosophy I know that I'm taking towards edge is focusing on upside, right? Like the guy I took, the edge player I took in round 2, Swinson, his profile, you look at it, they talk about first year as a full-time starter, graded really well. But they describe him as a player who can become an impact pass rusher, right? So for example, I've looked at Jack Sawyer in mock drafts, or I've had him or considered him for my 2nd round, but his profile is a high floor guy, but not necessarily as high of a ceiling, average pass run win percentage. And so, like, for me, I think you're going to get Zaven and Josh Sweat taking most of those snaps, and you're going to maybe have a few guys like, the guy they just signed, Baron Browning, who's an athletic guy, who's an upside guy.
Yeah.
You got BJ Ojulari, who's got some upside. I think if you're going edge, you're going with guys that you're taking a shot and hope they have upside. So I'm looking for the players that either have freak athleticism or something else that points to upside. Now, if you were looking to draft someone who you want to start, then I'd go with a high floor guy. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
I think Robert agrees with you that with Sweat on the team now, developmental edge makes sense, because you've got a little bit of leeway now with Sweat. You've got at least one clear number 1 guy. Baron Browning maybe can be that. He's been in the league a while. He can definitely get pressure, but you can take a pick on an edge that's not going to necessarily have to be that premier pass rusher day one, which would be nice. And if BJ Ojulari is who we think he is, and we keep saying that, and he keeps getting hurt, so who knows on that. But in the few little snippets we've seen of BJ Ojulari, there's something there. I do believe that. So hopefully we do get a season out of him. What else do we have in here?
Talking about Smart Suitor, I think, yeah. So in terms of the positions, obviously Milam, I love that pick because I made it. But I think that I like the philosophy. And again, as we mentioned, Mono didn't. This was before the signing, right, of Sweat. So the 2 edges is kind of the thing there. So
yeah, and what I'll say about Jalen Knoll before we move on to the next one, He is really personifying what I think of as an upgrade at slot over Greg Dortch. He's got a ton of slot experience, like more than 300 snaps last year in the slot. He's 5'11", 200 pounds, so he's got a little bit more to him than Greg Dortch too. But he's the like quick twitch type of slot receiver that you want. His long speed's fine. It's nothing crazy, but you can say the exact same thing about Greg Dortch. His long speed's nothing crazy, but he is quick and he's agile. And Jalen Knowles coming with a 52% contested catch rate to go along with all of that. And he had the 4th most deep yards in college football last year. Jalen Knowles a beast. And if you are going to dedicate a pick to wide receiver in this draft, then I think it's either someone who can be on an outside and just completely take the top off of defense with crazy elite speed, like you were talking about earlier, or a clear-cut upgrade at slot over Greg Dortch.
That makes sense. Yeah, for sure. It's not a great receiver class, so I'm not super big on going receiver. I took one, but I went late, right? A speed guy, right?
Yeah.
So.
All right, let's see what we got next. We've got Gazer Nick.
Gazornik.
Sorry.
I don't know. How is it pronounced? Is it Gazornik or Gazornik?
Please
know.
Tell us in the chat.
Please tell us.
Mr. Nick.
That's Brian.
Yeah. Oh, this is Brian.
Brian Shaw.
Brian. We have 2 trades, it looks like, in here. Starting with our first round pick, we do keep that. Number 16, we give to James Pierce Jr., who in the mocks that I've been doing in PFF, James Pierce has been consistently at 16 for like the last week or so. During Combine Week, there were the news stories that come out about players, about how he has like a hot temper and he'll fight people and stuff like that. Nothing I've read is like, oh my God, please keep him off my team. But it is maybe enough to bump him down a few spots from like a clear-cut top 10 pick like he seemed to be a few weeks ago. So I've seen him consistently available there. With Josh Sweat, I again don't think this is probably a realistic pick now. But beforehand, I thought that was totally reasonable. And let's see what he does with our round 2 pick. He takes number 47. He trades that to the Cincinnati Bengals to get pick 49 and a 4th rounder. Okay. Adding picks is always a good thing and a very Monty thing to do. And then you trade again in the 2nd round, which hasn't he done that before? He's traded the exact same pick that he just got for other picks. Does again feel like a Monty thing to do. So you take 49, you send that to Kansas City, and you get 63 in the 2nd round, 95 in the 3rd, and 132 in the 4th. So with your 2nd round, you take another Tennessee Volunteer, Omar Norman Lott, also former Sun Devil from Arizona State. Chris Paul Jr., great minds think alike, Brian. I like this one. Tate Ratledge, guard from Georgia, who I like a lot. He has been getting a lot more hype lately, so round 3 is an iffy thing for Ratledge, but I do like him quite a bit. Jamari Caldwell, defensive lineman from Oregon. Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, again, awesome pick. Tackle from Florida. I'm going to go slowly with this one. Oluwafemi Olodaho from UCLA, edge, and Kyle Williams, my man, from Washington State, wide receiver in round 5. So you are going from a 5-pick draft to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 picks with 2 different trade downs. I like the trade downs, and I like picking up more draft capital, especially with so few picks this year. And all of the positions make sense too. With that many picks, I particularly agree with taking 2 defensive linemen. If you got 8 picks and a class like this, I think you should. I don't know that much about Olodaho from UCLA, to be frank. Oladejo. Thank you, Simon. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm still learning about this draft class myself. I'm not really keen on taking another edge that late. And like I've talked about in the past that I love the Baltimore philosophy towards building edge, draft them in the middle rounds, develop them, and keep a pipeline of them. So, and then when one pops off, if you keep one maybe, but let some of them walk, but you have the next guy ready to go behind them. And as much as I do like that philosophy, we've already got some of those guys,
Yeah.
right? And so you've got enough of those guys. So if I'm going edge, I'm going upside or elite, right? And I know that is sort of a late flyer upside guy, but I think the Cardinals already have, they have Dimikage if they keep him around, right? They, in addition, what's the guy they drafted out of Clemson last year?
Xavier Thomas.
Xavier Thomas, right? You've got some of those guys already to develop, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah.
But overall, I like where the positions go on this one. I would maybe swap out the edge and interior defensive line for the top 2 picks, but that's just because of the Josh Sweat news.
I don't know if you saw this. Dana has some interest. Dana always has some really great insights. A couple other folks are talking about him as well. But that he's committed to edge. He's kind of converted a bit. So he is an interesting upside play. So he does fit the upside thing.
Okay. I will have to learn more about him, especially now that I'm kind of taking edge out of my mocks in the super early rounds. Mm-hmm. I'll have to look into this guy a lot more.
Yeah. I will say, and when I'm going edge in the first round, it's usually Pierce. So I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's see what we got next. We got red birds and red caps, also from the Discord. This one's a little bit harder to read. Let me do my best. And it does look like multiple trades in here. But let's focus on the players.
Is this Dana? I think that's Dana, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Let's see if I can get this. In a trade with, I believe, the Baltimore Ravens. There's a little bit of fuzz here. This is my fault.
Okay, so I can't read the trades, but I can read the players. I just maximize it. Darius Alexander at 32.
Yep.
Donovan Jackson at 47. Trey Amos at 59. Demetrius Knight at 63. Josiah Stewart at 78. Anthony Belton at 114. Torrey Horton at 129. Damian Martinez at 159. And Jack Kaiser at 201.
Okay. And this is Dana, looks like. She's letting us know that there are 2 trade backs in the first. So it does look like you traded back with Baltimore, and then you took the Baltimore pick and traded back again with Kansas City to get, or with Philadelphia maybe, to get to 32. I think I'm reading that right. But starting with the players, Donovan Jackson at 47 is a home run pick to me. He is the best interior offensive lineman to me in this draft. He could be a plug-in day one guard. So if you don't think that Isaiah Adams is at that point right now, I think Donovan Jackson can get you there if you're not bringing Will Hernandez back. So if you need a right guard and you are willing to go that high for it, I think Donovan Jackson is your man. Darius Alexander, I don't know a ton about. And my own bias here on players from, frankly, schools like Toledo and Tulsa, this is just my own bias and prejudice from years of being punished by Steve Keim, trying to take small school guys and trying to be smarter than every other executive in the league. And Monty Ossenfort is a Power 4 school, major programs drafter. He's drafted 21 players so far as the general manager, and only 4, I think, have not come from a Power 4 program. He is all about going to the big schools that have the systems in place to develop elite talent. So Darius Alexander, I don't know a ton about, and he could be absolutely fabulous. But Toledo alone makes it seem kind of unlikely to me.
So PFF has him graded as their 23rd ranked prospect. had a 90.1 grade last year. Again, it's a Toledo, so the competition level isn't as good. Had 4 sacks last year, 7 the year before. Is described as he's 6'4", 310. PFF, their comp for him is Kawan Short. They say explosive first step, good leg drive, good power, so athletic. His negatives sometimes can be a little slow out of his stance, sometimes little top heavy. So yeah, it's interesting. But I think you're right. Monty tends to go for the big programs more so, less of the small school players than Keim liked to. So yeah.
And for Demetrius Knight, for a lot of big boards and a lot of pundits, he's the top linebacker in this draft. The biggest knock against him is that I think he's 25 right now.
Yes, he was on some of my mocks, but he's 25. Yeah,
because I thought about taking him as well as that linebacker pick because I knew I wanted to take a linebacker, but I really can't get past a 25-year-old rookie.
That gives me pause. Linebackers play longer than some other positions, so I was a little more okay with it. It's not like we're talking about a running back.
Yeah,
but yeah. Dana's had some comments about Alexander stood out Senior Bowl, which they do like players from the bowl, the Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl. Similar to Darius Robinson, they had him working out at edge, even though he plays 3-4 defensive end and a 4-3 defensive tackle. So yeah.
All right. And just a side note, apparently the Dolphins are making a move for Joey Bosa. If I had to put money on it, I do think Joey Bosa is going to San Francisco and he's going to play with his brother. Because as much as I don't like either of them and I hate the San Francisco 49ers, how cool would it be to play in the NFL with your brother? That would be pretty awesome. So, and he's never healthy anyway, so I'm really not that concerned.
Right.
All right. Let's see what we got for the next one. We've got Ayerva. Looks like... Do we have a trade in this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 6 picks in here.
Someone was saying, I think Nick was saying that the Cardinals actually have 6 picks. I think there's been some confusion where they have 5 or 6. So 5 seemed a little, so I'm not sure, but yeah. How many draft picks?
I've been slightly confused on too, because I have seen 6 on some sites.
Yeah. So I've seen have 6 picks, including their own. Even the Arizona Cardinals website says 6. So I think PFF just needs to get their stuff together.
Gotcha. And I didn't see here that there is a little trade thing next to Isaiah Bond and Billy Bowman. So you did move down from 78, which is our actual 3rd round pick, to 87, and it looks like you picked up 123 in a 3rd round trade down. But you start in the 1st with Walter Nolan, defensive lineman, who I think is super talented, but the rumors out there about him just feel like a non-Jonathan Gannon type of player. If there's any truth to that, of course it's smokescreen season. You kind of never know what the actual truth is. But if there is any truth to that, he does not strike me as a Jonathan Gannon guy. Donovan Jackson, again, said everything I'm going to say about Donovan Jackson.
Can I say one more thing, though?
Please go ahead.
This.
Yeah.
The almighty chart says no IOL before round 3. And that's round 2, my friend.
It is round 2. I don't think Donovan Jackson will be there in round 3. So if you want him, you might have to reach for him. If you're putting that high of a priority on it, I think there's a very high likelihood they are going to run with Evan Brown and Isaiah Adams as the starting guards. Like pretty high probability, actually. Mm-hmm. But if it happened, would not be upset with Donovan Jackson there at all. Now, Isaiah Bond is interesting. He got a lot of heat during the combine for making a lot of cocky statements that he was going to break the 40 record. He was going to run a 4.1. Did he know that, Joe? Ooh. He promised he was going to run a 4.1, and then he runs a 4.41, I believe.
He's what I meant to say was well, what had happened was he did not run very fast, and then his teammate Matthew Golden runs the fastest 40 time this year. So
Not that that really means anything about his playing ability. It's just not the best of looks. But still a talented receiver. At 87, maybe a bit high for where they'd be comfortable taking a wide receiver if they do in this draft. But I do think there's something to him there. But I have personally not mocked him there.
Yeah.
Jared Ivey's also a guy that I have not mocked either, the edge from Mississippi. And there are at least 4 draftable Ole Miss players, I believe, along the defensive line and edge. So you've got Jared Ivey and Walter Nolan. So in this draft, you're taking 2 Ole Miss guys. And then Princely Umanmielen, who is kind of going in the second round a lot. Jared Ivey, I don't know a ton about.
So can I jump in here? Now, PFF has him ranked higher. They have him ranked to 60. And I have looked at him in some of my mocks, like on round late or 2 or 3. And 6'6", 285. So he's a little more of that, gonna be a guy that might play a 3 technique or move up and down that defensive line, or maybe play on the edge on more nickel. But he's bigger. Their profile says he's a physically gifted player with devastating power in his hands at the point of attack, stack and shed consistently. He lacks the speed, lower body flexibility to be a speed. Actually reminds me a lot of Darius Williams. Darius Williams is not actually super fast. He's just really strong and powerful and good hand usage. So this guy and they comp him to John Franklin Myers. So I actually like him in terms of just like, he is not the speed outside edge guy, but he is more kind of the big, powerful guy who can play maybe a little up and down the line a little bit. So I don't mind that. And if you look at like the New England Patriots, which is really, again, Monty comes from that school of thoughts, and I go that obviously the coaching staff's input matters a lot too here, but they liked bigger edge. They like taking bigger 3-4 outside linebackers and guys that could play a little bit of hybrid and that could stop the run, but also do a little bit of rush in the passer too. So Jared Ivey intrigues me, I'll say.
Okay. I will look more into him. Billy Bowman looks like that developmental safety you were mentioning earlier. At 123 from Oklahoma. And Holland Pierce is interesting here at 153 at tackle. He, from what I remember, is absolutely massive. He is 6'8", 344 pounds. He is a giant man. The only thing I would say against that specifically for the Cardinals is I'm not sure they're interested in offensive linemen that big when Kyler Murray is 5'10". I am not a big Kyler Murray's way too short. He's been perfectly fine. He's fine. He's been short his entire playing life. He knows how to handle it. But 6'8" is crazy. That is huge. And 344 pounds. And he's coming out of Rutgers. He's played right tackle a few years ago and left tackle. So he has played both positions, and he's only allowed 1 sack last year. Like he's solid. He has gone way up and down the trend pick chart though. Mm-hmm. So I'm not entirely sure what's happening with him, but he did get better every year.
And they compare him to Trent Brown, which is really the massive tackle, right? San Francisco and New England, I think, right, is where he played, if I'm not mistaken, Trent Brown. But I agree with when you look at it, they do so much zone running, wide zone, but they do all different kinds of zone, and they want someone who can move. And that just a guy that big, I'm not so sure about that, how he fits into that kind of running scheme.
There was an offensive lineman in last year's draft whose name is escaping me right now, but he was 6'7". And I remember hearing the same arguments about that. Mm-hmm. Just like not the fit for this team. And Holland Pierce wins his battles with edges and outside linebackers just because he's a monster. He's using like pure power and pure force to do that. He's not really a finesse guy. Mm-hmm. And in this James Conner and Kyler Murray run heavy offense, you need a little bit of finesse in the run game. I'm not sure Holland Pierce does that.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a thick boy, though.
Yeah. So yeah, it's maybe a team that runs more of a power run, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to say not so much, right?
I could see him as a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah, that's actually a team I was thinking about, right?
He'd be incredible as a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe the Chargers. Like, you know, could see something like that too.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't Joe Alt that I was thinking of. I'll try to think of his name later.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. He's really big.
Yeah, massive human being. All right, but that's for this time. Let's move on to the next one real quick. See what we've got from Red Sea, also from the Discord. And we're starting off with first round trade. Seems like a common thing, and it won't surprise me in the slightest. I think it was Amarius Mims.
I'll find who I think. I think it was.
It also could have been Tyler Guyton. No. Dwan Jones. Thank you. That's who it was.
That's
Thank
it.
you, Simon.
And
Dwan Jones.
And I'm going to tell you, if anyone was the OG folks who were here for Mock Draft Monday may remember, people were mocking him a lot, and I kept saying, I don't think so.
Yep, I remember that.
I would shoot that one down a lot because of just not a good fit for the zone running scheme they're doing.
Yep, I agree. I think 6'4", 6'5" is like the sweet spot for the Cardinals offensive line.
Yeah, I think 6'5" is like, I think what PJJ is, I think
so.
Yeah.
All right, so Red Sea. You got that first round trade back only to 19, which is, I think, super reasonable. And you pick up a third. So that's pretty good. 3 spots down, you're still going to get a great player. Kenneth Grant could very well still be there at 19, which is exactly who you go with, which I think, in my personal opinion, is an excellent pick. Mm-hmm. You followed our lead, me and Joe here, and you still go with Ole Miss player. Ole Miss had a crazy defense this year, so they're getting a lot of players drafted. But typically the edge that you see going first of that group is Princely here at 47, and this is roughly where I see him pretty consistently, is around this spot in the second round. And Chris Paul Jr. talked about. Tackle from Purdue, Marcus. I think it's Mabau. Could be wrong. Also a big fella. I believe I have gotten the seal of approval on Marcus from Aaron Van Buren, who is my go-to offensive line expert.
Okay.
Because I have drafted Marcus before in my mocks. And a guy I like a lot in the 4th round, Aeneas Peebles out of Virginia Tech. He had a great combine. He ran a sub-5, big human being, moving weight at a really fast speed, like a good athlete at that position, and a really good interior disruptor. Him and who was that edge? Antoine Powell-Ryland out of Virginia Tech are a really good team. I like both of them. And then Kyle Williams in the 5th round.
People's grades outstanding out of Virginia Tech. 89.1 PFF grade last year, 86.1 the year before. So who did this? Red Sea? Hate it. Just kidding. Had to mess with. No, this is like Kenneth Grant. Obviously, we love that. Trading back and still getting him. Getting an edge rusher in round 2. Chris Paul, we love. Getting a tackle round 3, love it. Slides inside the guard, as he says. Getting a defensive, and Peoples is 6'1", 290. So that's he's a little smaller, but kind of compact. But to get a guy who's disruptive. More of a 3 technique, absolutely getting a receiver late. Yeah.
I like this one.
Yeah.
I think this addresses all of the needs in a sensible order, particularly with the Sweat edition now. This makes a lot of sense to me. Princely, as a guy who's not really developmental per se, I mean, he's a 2nd rounder. You expect him to do something, but you throw him into that rotation with another 2nd rounder, BJ Ojolari and Baron Browning, and you've got Josh Sweat to take some of the heat off. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that a lot.
I mean, Princely had a 91.1 PFF grade in the SEC, so Playing against Georgia, played really well against Georgia, 93.7. Had 11 sacks. They talk him as more of a finesse. He's not as good, not as stout against the run. So he's got, you got to bulk up if you want him to be more than a pass rush specialist. But yeah.
Sure. I hear the argument a lot that conference and school doesn't matter. Football players can come from anywhere. And of course there's truth to that. But if we take the numbers as a whole and you give me a guy who has gone up consistently and succeeded against SEC level competition, I'm going to have more faith in that than something else. SEC, Big Ten are two conferences where if you can go and be at the highest level in those two conferences, I'm going to put more faith in that than you destroying the MAC or the Mountain West. So Princely being able to do that in the SEC is very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you got a guy like Kobe Turner, for example, came from Wake Forest, though he had played at a bigger conference or at a bigger program before. But he was from a little bit smaller team, but he dominated. Right. Yeah. So if you're at a small program, you can find guys there. They have to absolutely dominate, and they have to show that they've got the measurables through pro days and combine. Right. So you really need to make sure that that it's not just the competition, that they hold up. That's why Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl are really important, especially for guys like that, if they can compete there. So you can find those guys, but they have to dominate both in terms of their tape and their grades, and they have to look good in those bowl games. But then when you've got a guy who grades well in the SEC against good competition, then that grade came against a good competition. So you feel there's a higher level of confidence there.
Agreed. And Drew, this isn't really an update. Of course, the Suns lost. We knew that in our
heart. Yep.
All right, let's see what we got next. We have Brian here from the Discord.
Another Brian? Yeah.
Another Brian. Walter Nolan with 16th pick. Donovan Jackson again at 47. So pretty popular second round pick for you.
Sorry, couldn't resist.
I did see a comment in the chat that Donovan Jackson technically breaks the chart because he is listed in many places as a tackle. Okay. And after the Simmons injury this year, he did play tackle.
Okay. So here's what you have to feel like. You have to be confident that the Cardinals plan to draft him and play him at tackle.
I'm not. I don't think
if you're not, then
he would be a guard.
Yes, he's a guard.
An edge that I've seen a few times, but I think first time tonight at 74, JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. He has gone up and down the boards too. I've seen him as high as the first round and down here in the third round too. And he is part of a third round pick with Carolina Panthers, it seems.
But he's a high floor guy. I talked about that earlier. With Ohio State, graded at 86.2, had 15 sacks. So, and against good competition. So although, it was a big jump from the year before, we had 4 sacks in the 74.5 grade. But again, as I talked about before, if I'm looking edge, I'm looking high upside, not high floor.
Yeah.
If you already had your Batman and you need kind of a Robin to just kind of be a guy to set the edge and do some stuff, that's fine. But we need a Batman in the works right now.
Yeah, I totally see that. Barrett Carter is a linebacker I've seen and I've personally mocked a few times because you can be getting him around that 4th round area. So linebacker out of Clemson, and then finishing it off with 153, JJ Pegues.
Someone in the chat help us with that, please.
I think it's Pegues. I do think you're right. And I watched his combine workout too. Pretty agile guy. I don't think he ran anything crazy in the 40 or anything.
I mean, he's 6'2", 325, so he's nose tackle size, right? So he's not going to run crazy fast, right?
Yeah, but your point about Tuimoloau is exactly what I think of him. Not going to be perennial all-pro, probably not a Pro Bowl guy, but will stay on a roster for quite a while and just be a a consistent guy. So in the third round, that's not terrible, terrible value. Higher than that, you kind of start to get a little bit iffy. But that sort of thing about Ohio State.
Yeah.
Like we were saying earlier, it's a program that just churns out professional players that probably aren't going to be terrible, and they're not going to be big busts. They just might not always be Nick Bosa's.
I like Pegues, or how do you pronounce it?
I'm going with Pegues currently.
Pegues, because they really need a nose in here, right? A guy who's got that build. They need a lot of different things on defensive line, but having a true nose, is kind of an important thing for this defense, I think. And he has that build, and he also is. They describe him as relentless. So I think that's kind of a nice, obviously, trait to have in an interior defensive lineman. So for if you're going kind of later, I kind of like that. Pegues, I think.
Yeah, Dana, who I trust with my life at this point.
She knows her stuff. Yeah,
thinks it's Pegues, but looked good at the Senior Bowl, and we are a big bowl drafting team.
Yeah,
so that is something to keep an eye out for. All right, let's see what we got next. We've already gone an hour and 40 minutes, so we are gonna be going through these last few, and we'll get you guys out of here at a reasonable time. All right, what do we have after Brian? We've got Mr. Money Manette.
I always pronounce it Minetti, but I don't know. I think he made that up, so I don't even know if there's really a right pronunciation. I think I asked him once, and he's like, I don't know. I just made it up.
Well, tell us in the chat your preferred pronunciation if you're in here. Let's see what we got. We've got a trade in here. Clearly, we're going down from 16 to 25, and it looks like we're picking up 89 as part of that trade. So in the first round, 25, we got Donovan Ezeiruaku from Boston College Edge, player I like a lot. Darius Alexander, defensive lineman, 47 from Toledo. So we've seen him earlier as high as 32, I think in Dana's mock draft. We got him here at 47. Tate Ratledge at 78 seems to be pretty common around that third round area. Emory Jones, offensive tackle from LSU at 89. Jamari Caldwell, we've seen a few times too from Oregon at 114. And then someone we have not seen today, wide receiver Dante Thornton from Tennessee. So Ezeiruaku, I like a lot. He is not breaking that top half of the first round talent, but I could see him going anywhere from the bottom half of the second round to the first half of the second round. He has like the crazy bend, crazy. He reminds me a lot of BJ Ojulari, actually. So 25, I wouldn't be that mad about it, but he feels maybe like a little bit of a reach there, but I've seen him as high as 16 too. And Darius Alexander, we've talked about. Tate Ratledge, I think, is a really solid guard. I would not be mad with that at all. Dante Thornton, don't know a ton about.
Yeah, I'm going to look him up.
Mono saying is a 6'4" wide receiver, and he won a bunch at the Shrine Bowl, which Shrine Bowl is a definite thing for the Cardinals.
6'5", 215 is what PFF has him at. They don't have a lot from him. Grades 80.2, had 26 receptions, 662 yards. So yards per reception 25.5. So crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So Dante Thornton, I'm going to see if we can get I'm curious about a 40 time combine prospect profile. 40-yard, 4.3, 40-yard dash for Dante Thornton.
Okay.
I like it.
I like 4.3.
Wow.
You got me at 4.3.
You had me at 4.3 and at 6'5". Wow. So I will say college numbers, like not crazy production. I know that was like a lot of yards, but only 26 receptions the year before, 13 the year before, 17, right? So not now they've had some other wide receivers there in recent years in Tennessee, right? That got drafted, but so this seems like a very athletic guy who, for whatever reason, hasn't necessarily um, been as productive, right?
Yeah.
So, but when you got that size and speed, right? That's impressive.
That size and speed is always going to be wanted in the NFL. You get freaky men like DK Metcalf with that size and speed every once in a while.
Yeah.
He's not as big, but still, that is impressive size and impressive speed. And Emory Jones, tackle from LSU, I know he's a little bit of a developmental guy. He's pretty raw. He's 6'6", 315 pounds, so totally fine size. He was recruited into college as an interior offensive lineman, but he looks like he's played pretty much all of his snaps at right tackle in college at LSU. So great program, but any different than Christian Jones as a developmental right tackle? I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Like, I think if you're going tackle, you probably are going early because you've got that developmental guy already, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Now, I mean, the Patriots drafted a guy years ago, Marcus Cannon, in the 5th round, who became a starting right tackle, and that's so when you look at like what the philosophy that Monty may take, that's where Christian Jones comes in. He's that day 3 developmental right tackle, and they do like finding those guys there. But if they're going another tackle in the draft, I think what they're doing is getting a guy who has more starter upside immediately, high end starter.
Yeah. Marcus Cannon, by the way, hometown, Roswell, New Mexico.
Okay.
Let's go. All right. Let's move on to Simon.
All right. Ooh, spicy.
Simon, you're going crazy. This is the spiciest one so far, I think. It looks like a straight stick and pick draft. Starting at 16, wide receiver Matthew Golden. He did have the fastest 40 time in this year's draft, which is a 4.28, I believe. Coming from Texas, he's a fabulous player. Like, he really is. He's crazy good. But we took Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 4 last year. Okay, you're exploring alternative strategies rather than edge or D tackle.
I like it.
I get it.
Give us a different look, right?
That's what mocks are for. This is all for fun. So I love to think about Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, and Matthew Golden together. Well, that's really fun to think about. Braden Swinson at edge in the 2nd round. Someone we haven't seen tonight, but I've seen mocked to the Cardinals a few times. Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College. CJ West again in the 4th. I like that a lot. I'll say again. And then taking a backup quarterback, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon in the 5th. I don't think if there were more picks, taking a backup quarterback would be out of the question, because Clayton Tune is not a viable solution as a backup. If you're 8 games into the season and Kyler Murray gets hurt, you are losing the next game if Clayton Tune is going to be your starter. That's just kind of the reality of the situation. So getting an improvement there totally makes sense. I think it's silly to think, we're going to draft a quarterback to push Kyler Murray. No, that's not going to happen. But Dylan Gabriel probably is an improvement over Clayton Tune.
I will say, and we when we had that conversation earlier about other positions, I didn't bring up quarterback, but like the Patriots took quarterbacks in the middle rounds pretty frequently. Jacoby Brissett, guys like that, right?
Yeah.
Even when they had Tom Brady, and I'm not saying Kyler Murray is Tom Brady, but like they had a starting quarterback, but they still took Jimmy Garoppolo, right?
Yeah.
They took those guys every couple of years, right? Yeah, and so and then they took what's his name, Clayton Tune, right? So it wouldn't shock me if they do take a quarterback. I think with their limited number of draft picks, I think it's if they do take a quarterback, it's probably only if they do a trade back to add picks.
Yeah, agreed.
But I do think at Mono's points, I could also see them go sign a veteran backup, right?
That seems far more likely to me.
Yeah.
If you're only going to have these, whatever it is, 5 or 6 picks, I don't think you're wasting one of those on your backup quarterback.
Yeah.
When there are so many quarterbacks out there that you can pick up and have as a better backup than Clayton Tune.
Yeah.
If it was last year's 12 pick draft, sure. Yeah, spend one on Dylan Gabriel, who I like. He's fine. I don't think he really has starting potential in the league. He's older. He's been in college forever, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
But Ozzie Tripio I like a lot. I think he's a true tackle, though. I don't really see him as an interior guy. And Braden Swinson, you had him? You had him in the second?
I did. That was the edge I ended up going with there. Yeah.
All right. So overall, I like this. Even though the experimental wide receiver in the first round is not something that I believe will realistically happen.
Yeah.
I get where you're going with it. Wide receiver can be improved for the Arizona Cardinals. It's just not the biggest need, especially with the defense just needing so damn much. Wide receiver is pretty low on that priority list, but it's never a bad thing to get your quarterback better weapons. Never a bad thing.
I've said this before, and I know I'm repeating myself, but when I look at how they are building this offense, I think they are building it more akin to the Ravens offense than they are the Miami offense. Meaning they're not going a track team at receiver and hot first round picks or high. I just don't think they're going to invest, or even like when you look like Cincinnati, right? I don't think they're going to invest in multiple high end wide receivers. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride are their two main pass catchers. That's where their salary cap. That's where they're going to spend at pass catchers.
Yep.
And I think then they're going to have their second and third wide receivers be a rotating kind of guys like Michael Wilson that they draft that are solid, right? Which Ravens offense, and more when I say is personnel, right? In terms of the Ravens have never really gone with a lot of investment in the wide receiver. They've invested in the tight end. Now, clearly we've gone Marvin Harrison Jr., so they're going to have that one guy, but in a run-heavy offense, I just don't think it makes sense, even from a allocation of resources, to draft another first-round wide receiver to spend all that money if you're going to go run-heavy offense, right?
Yeah.
So I like receiver. I went with one, but I think it's later. I think they've made their big investment receiver, and they're going to invest in Trey McBride, and they're going to kind of go, a little bit more of a budget for the rest of the receivers, and they're going to invest in offensive line and in defense where the money's going to be at, and the high picks.
Sure. I totally agree. The Ravens have been making it work with Rashad Bateman as their number one guy. And then they added Isaiah Likely to the tight end room, and you had 2 tight end 1 eligible dudes.
Yeah.
They run a system similar to what I think we want to run.
Yes.
And I agree with this. We do need to stretch the field out
but you don't need a first round pick to do that.
Exactly. And something that I've heard, and I do agree with, to bring some context to Marvin Harrison Jr.'s rookie season, is a lot of the guys who come in and do stuff like that their rookie year that we probably had this over expectation of, aren't always coming in as the number one immediately. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is keyed in on from day one, week one, as the number one guy, the clear-cut number one receiver in Arizona. No one had any questions about that. He had no one taking attention away from him. Michael Wilson's a good wide receiver too, but it's not like they're doubling Michael Wilson on the other side of the field. So he didn't have that. When Larry was a rookie, he had Anquan Bolden on the other side taking a lot of attention. And even at that rate, Marvin Harrison Jr. had a perfectly fine rookie season. We overreacted, and we put a lot of expectations, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase expectations on him. He is going to have a great career. he will be perfectly fine, especially with the work ethic that he is supposedly endowed with. He will be an amazing player for a long time.
Better rookie season than Larry Fitzgerald had.
Exactly. And equivalent with his Hall of Fame father and Anquan Bolden, he will be perfectly. 8 touchdowns as a rookie is good. I don't know why we're losing the plot on that. He did fine, and he will get even better. And he just happens to have a really, really elite tight end taking a lot of attention in that offense.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. It's amazing to have an elite tight end in this offense.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. We might have one more that might have been. Here's our last
Robert
one.
Moore.
Justice 21, Robert Moore. I know you're in the chat.
Yep, he's right there.
All right, what did you do? You trade down from 16 to 21, looks like, with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you pick up a 4th-round pick to go along with that. And Derek Harmon at 21 is another choice I think makes complete sense. He's my second pick for a first-round D-tackle other than Kenneth Grant. So if Kenneth Grant's gone, Derek Harmon, love. He had a great combine too. He's super athletic. He played well at a really top-tier program in Oregon. Love Derek Harmon. In the second round at 47, we've got JT Tuimoloau again, a round earlier than what we saw earlier. But I see him around this range quite a bit. Tate Ratledge at 78. Maybe the most common pick, actually, if you take all of the mocks from tonight. 78 Tate Ratledge has happened a lot. Jamari Caldwell in the 4th, Barrett Carter as well, and Logan Brown. So I think we've had all of these players at some point tonight. And Jamari Caldwell, Derek Harmon taking 2 defensive linemen, both from Oregon. I think that's interesting. You've got some chemistry there that's already inbuilt, and I like both of them.
Yeah, for sure. And Harmon's interesting because he's a taller interior defensive lineman, right?
Yeah.
So whereas a lot of the guys were taken, like Grant is built more like a nose, right? So this is a guy who's built a little taller. Like they comp him to Christian Barmore, I think, Barmore, and so that's really interesting. It's a little more. It's not your true nose. It's a little more next, playing a little big for a 3 technique, but maybe a defensive tackle in a 4-3 kind of defense. But guy you can move around a little bit on the interior. So really interesting player. Grades really well. Got a linebacker late, Barrett Carter, right? So that's kind of 6'1", 230, very athletic. Right. So that could be a nice, another weak side linebacker, right? Which Chris Paul Jr., who a lot of us took, was a weak side linebacker. So this is another player in that mold. So really heavy on the defensive line, right here, an edge. So which is a theme, right? So
that's probably the theme of the night, and of all the mocks I've seen for Arizona, this is just the year you got to fix the front 7. Some way, somehow, fix the front 7.
And thankfully, it's a good draft for that.
It lines up perfectly. It really is lining up to be a really impactful draft. This draft could have a lot of impact on long-term success for years. And for Derek Harmon, to go back to him, he is 6'5", 310.
Mm-hmm.
He's 22, so he's leaving after his junior year. And PFF kind of projects him as a 3 technique and an even front.
Okay.
Which doesn't mean a ton with the Cardinals defense because they play around with fronts so much,
right,
that you can play around with Derek Harmon and Darius Robinson in a lot of unique ways. So you don't have to tie him to anything like that. And the knock that you see on him is that he really only had 1 year of production in college, of real production, but he's played a lot. He's gotten a lot of snaps, and the vast majority of his snaps are in the B gap. So that is sort of the player you want. But he's an interior disruptor, dude, with a plus 17% pass rush win rate. He gets inside. He doesn't always close a deal. He had 5 sacks last year, which is nothing crazy, but that's pretty good in college for an interior guy. And if you got him and a healthy Darius Robinson doing that sort of thing on the interior, you really open up everything for Josh Sweat and Baron Browning and the guys on the edge. So Derek Harmon could be a great pick there. I think him and Kenneth Grant. Kenneth Grant has a slight edge for me, but I like Derek Harmon a lot. And I wouldn't even mind this double up here and take teammates from Oregon. It's a great program. They develop good players. It's that makes sense to me. And Caldwell is a little bit better, like Drew says, as a run stopper. So as part of that rotation, depending on run down, passing downs, these are guys that you can take in and out of the lineup depending on what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, it gives you some nice pieces to move around that do some different things. And with defensive line, you need that depth. You need the rotation. You need to keep them fresh. So stock up on that. And this is, it's something they didn't really do much first couple of years of the rebuild. Really hope to see them go all in on that this year.
Absolutely. I think that's the last one that we have for tonight.
Okay.
It's been a 2-hour stream, guys. But it's the first Mock Draft Monday in a year. We're back. We got what we wanted in Josh Sweat signing today, so we're all in a pretty good mood. We have some hope for the future. It's a good night, and we got to talk about hope, which is all that we live on as Cardinals fans. Is just heavy doses of hope. But this draft class lines up super well with the Cardinals' needs. We really do seem to have a front office that at least is aware of what the problems are, haven't done anything crazy, and a coaching staff that knows what it wants out of players. So overall, I think there is reason to have some hope.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been a big believer in Monty, and from what I've seen, he's building the right way. Drafting premium positions early, not going too crazy in free agency, but now he's shown this year that he will spend when he's got the money, and he's hit. His draft picks have done well. He's had guys who've contributed up and down that draft board, right? Now we need to see some of those guys hit their high end potential, and it's still early. PJJ seemed to really kind of be hitting his stride. We need to see more, so we need to see the upside of the blue chippers hit their potential, but like the floor on his drafts have been good. So there is reason to be excited because he's doing things, the smart way in terms of how he's approaching it. And it's working out so far in terms of the personnel. Now we just need to see the results on the field get better, or continue to get better. So there is excitement. Draft season is here. Yes, I am excited. And we've got a new host to bring us Mock Draft Monday. Also, real quick, want to shout out that we're going to be doing a free agency sort of reaction recap with both of us and some of the other folks that are going to be part of the TCR community here. So that's going to be Wednesday night. So make sure you tune in then. We're going to talk about free agency, what's happened up to that point, what's next, and things like that, and some reactions and responses to that.
Yep, that'll be fun. Hopefully we get a few more moves, a few more outside additions to talk about by Wednesday. Monty's a pretty cautious guy. Mm-hmm. We might have seen the big splash of this offseason with Josh Sweat, probably most likely.
Yeah.
But I think he's trying to build a team the right way. I, for now, trust in our chef Monty to do his thing. But yes, do tune in to the free agency live stream on Wednesday night. This will also return next week with a different guest. Our Papa Joe will not be here next week on the 17th, St. Patrick's Day. I'll try to make sure to wear green. All of you should as well. But for now, I think we had a great first mock draft of the season. Really appreciate everyone that was in here. I hope we got to everyone at least once. I want to thank everyone in the TCR Discord for submitting mock drafts. So we have so much to talk about that we talked for 2 hours about hypotheticals for a draft that is over a month away. Mm-hmm. What more fun can you have on a Monday night?
Well, I think there's one last thing we can do to really cap it off. As a sort of old school reminder, I think we've got a certain video we can play on our way out for the folks that are here.
I think we can, and I think you guys will enjoy this.
Hey, yo, it's Joe Mo. He's the host of Mock Draft Monday on the Cardinals show. So join the live, hit like and subscribe. Enjoy the podcast tonight. Enjoy the podcast tonight.